Hello, and welcome back to another one of these. I've been replaying the Souls games and rating all their areas and bosses with consistent metrics, mostly just to see how they hold up when I'm not conveniently downplaying the bits that don't fit my overall views, as is a very common trait in Souls discourse. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. Large-scale critiques tend to be dominated by overall impressions rather than painstaking piece-by-piece acknowledgement, but it is a thing that happens, and I'm curious to see how big of an impact that is. I'm not going to do the whole rundown of the methodology this time, because that's all in the Demon Souls one. Just watch the first few minutes of that if you're finding it confusing. Dark Souls is probably the poster boy for this effect, so I'm keen to see how it turns out. It famously has a pretty awful second half, and basically all the discourse on the game comes down to fans either ignoring it, or non-fans hyper-focusing on it. I'm definitely more in the former camp, so I'm excited to see how badly it all falls apart when I can't just say I was already really happy and the happiness let me coast through. Given the last video ended up so insanely long, I'm going to try and run through things a lot faster, so I'm not going to be justifying every single score. Hopefully this will get things done a bit faster even with the longer game. Feel free to comment if you want me to back up any of my figures used if my cliff notes aren't clear enough. As with before, this isn't a review. There's a lot of detail and mechanical nuance to these games which deserve analysis, which I'm not providing. These games are more than areas and bosses, but they are the things that are consistent across the entire series, so that's what we're looking at. It's still entirely opinion based also. Just because I use Excel and more numbers than necessary doesn't make it any less subjective. This game is pretty big, so let's just jump right into it with the Undead Asylum, almost certainly my favourite tutorial area From has ever made. It's a lovely little microcosm of the game as a whole. In this tiny little area there's multiple loops with new shortcuts that open up. I love the jump scare pre-weapon boss encounter and the eventual empowering payback. As a tutorial it guides you enough to learn the basic gameplay without being too hand-holdy. It's also elevated by having a later return trip option which opens up another wing and boss encounter. The Asylum Demon is our first actual boss, and here's the Vanguard Demon again. There's not a massive amount to say about him, but I do like the idea of the first encounter before you have a weapon for an intimidating introduction or a fun bonus challenge. It's a shame that the reward for doing so is completely unusable for most of the game though. After that fun little intro, we're off to Firelink Shrine, a fairly excellent hub. The revolving door of NPCs across the game is nice. It's fairly attractive to look at, even if it's not their best. It's really fun to explore around, with lots of hidden loot. Some of it's really quite excellent too. It links directly or near directly with 7 to 9 areas, depending on how you want to look at the Valley of the Drakes as a locale. I even like the Lautrec quest here, given that his penalty isn't permanent. The only real downside is that it starts you facing away from the first level, which can lead to a rough start. After a little bit of suicide running for early game treasures, we're off to the first area, the Undead Burg, which actually doesn't hold up quite as well as I remembered. There's some neat treasure side routes, the Black Knight turnaround gag is terrifying and is a fun bonus challenge, the bonfire is useful for access to multiple areas, but there's no shortcut until after the boss, and a pretty likely cheap death. The run back to the boss is also quite tedious, as you need to get through the whole level pretty much every time. The Lower Burg is actually not considered a unique zone, which helps out here because it elevates the overall zone with some extra large-scale shortcuts and some additional scale in general, while not consisting of very much within itself, so it probably would have scored very poorly on its own. Our first real boss might actually be easier than the Asylum Demon. He's mediocre looking and only has like 3 slow swings, and that's pretty much all there is to say about him. You can plunge attack him, but honestly I think he's easier just to fight head on, since doing that gets you stuck brawling in a doorway. The dragon on the bridge doesn't have a health bar, so technically he isn't a boss. Which is good for my set, because I couldn't beat him right now. I got the tail cut, which gives the Drakesword, which is good for the next 10 or so minutes, so that's something. My Zweihander was out damaging as soon as I met Andre, and I got a Black Knight drop as well. It's not worth doing the arrow cheese for, I reckon. So with that guy skipped, the next area is the Undead Parish, which is a pretty good one. Obviously it has a similar style to the Burg, but I still think it looks good. This place is all about shortcuts and one-time mini-bosses, with a Black Knight, Piggy, Tower Knight, Titan Knight Demon, and Channeler all crammed into 2 fairly short loops. I enjoy the density. I really like the Boulder Knights as an enemy, and that one big shortcut was a life-changing moment for myself and many others in appreciating what games can do with world design. There's even a couple of NPC things here, and it's a fairly good early game Titan Knight farm if you're needing that. My only issue is that the boss runback has a mob which is just a bit too annoying to deal with when rushing. The boss here is a much better take on the Gargoyles fight from Demon Souls. They look much better with their cool statues coming to life intro, they stay on the ground a lot, and they actually synergize pretty well. The first one is more melee focused, while the second one likes breathing fire. There's also a tail you can cut off for the axe I was planning to use for this playthrough, but I don't know if I'll be able to resist that once I've got the stats for the Black Knight sword. Next up, I went to Darkroot Garden and gained enough souls to prove to myself that no, I can't resist. This is a nice change of pace from all the claustrophobic castles that we've been fighting through so far, and now we have this nice, spooky, dark green, foresty thing. This place is exceedingly simple, but I like the enemies, and having a bit more room to breathe. If you want to fork out 20,000 souls or kill a Hydra, there's also a Covenant area which provides a lot of PvP and some looting. In isolation, the extra area isn't great as it's just a bigger open field with enemies everywhere, but it does add some scale to the zone overall. The boss is also a change of pace, I suppose, but it sucks. The butterfly floats around, spamming magic, some of which is extremely hard to dodge, and just kind of chips at you for a few minutes. Then it lands, lets you beat it up for a bit, and if you're not using a ridiculous Black Knight sword that one-cycles it, it flies away and does it all again. Very bad. From messed up with their naming conventions with our next zone, since Darkroot Basin is basically just another wing of Darkroot Garden like the PvP forest, and should have been treated as such. Now they have to cup a crappy score from a bad YouTube video 15 years later. Joke's on them. It's pretty much a hub field for connecting 4 zones with nothing much in it except for a mini-boss. If the areas were combined, the pairing probably would score pretty high across the board. Said mini-boss also suffers from not having a health bar, so despite not being a boss, it is really quite epic. I mean, the fight with it is still lame, but still, it feels kinda sad taking something so epic and making it worth nothing more than a tilt point. With all that done, it's time to head to the depths and make some forward progress, and the way to do that is through Capra Daemon. Capra is a cartoonishly badass looking dude, and his assault the second you go through a door is a rush, but that's where the good vibes end. In isolation, he's no more advanced than the Taurus Daemon, and their method for spicing him up is to stick him in a shoebox with a vision obscuring trees and clutter, and putting a couple of dogs in there. It's just a lot of annoying touches on an otherwise cool looking but mediocre fight. The depths as an area is a mixed bag. This is a place most people try to burn through, and for good reason. There's a lot to not like down here. The opening section is just gank mobs of hollows and dogs that hit way harder than you'd expect. The only decent enemies don't even respawn. The lower portion is nothing but slimes, rats, and curse-inflicting frogs. It's a sewer, so it looks bad, and not even in a particularly impressive way, since the poop blobs aren't exactly visually impressive. On the other hand, I honestly think it's one of the best laid out levels in the whole series. It does the Stonefang 2 hidden drop skip again to let you into the bonfire quickly, which I just love. There's several distinct areas, with convoluted pathways and variable methods of approach. There's even a place where you can farm up some good materials if you're willing to be a bit bored. The boss here is a good one, I reckon. He looks phenomenal. The fight itself isn't too bad. He's tanky enough that even my ridiculous sword couldn't delete him in under 30 seconds. His moveset isn't incredible, but he can attack from like 4 different body parts, so there's some variety in what comes out, and there's a tail cut. The main annoyance comes from how he whips around shields with a lot of swings, and that his repositioning steps as he's moving around do damage and cause flinching. As with the Valley of Defilement, one of my personal flaws is that I love Blighttown. There's something about this style of ramshackle, rotting boardwork that speaks to my soul. I just love how it looks. I also love the design of the place. There's so much up and down and confusing winding, with all the guides constantly finding their way to you so it never feels safe. There's some crazy good treasure here, and if we want to include Quelaag's domain as part of it, which I do, there's even quite a lot of NPC activity down the bottom. Obviously the downside to this is that the swamp at the bottom is not a separate zone, and it's a big ass poison swamp full of slugs and poo. I don't actually hate the look of it as far as swamps go thanks to the tree roots and web mountain, but it does need to bring the whole thing down a notch. Despite my love for it, I do need to acknowledge the annoyance factor. It adds to the excitement for me, but you are endlessly getting tracked down, pelted with toxic, and you will be poisoned literally your whole time down the bottom. It's pretty inarguable that it's designed to give you a bad time. Some may say I've been too generous, but true annoyance is coming up next. The boss here is another winner, with Quelaag pulling off the fabled sexy spider image to aplomb. Her hitboxes are a bit wacky, and the lava traps can lead to some nonsense where you get exploded into a lava pit and die, but she's still definitely one of the better fights mechanically so far. After this, I was unsure on where to go. Obviously the way forward is to Anor Londo, but there's a lot of areas still open to me. In the old one, I'd soul dupe Quelaags until I could buy all of Pyrobo's stuff to unlock Quelana, but that's been patched. Probably for the best, since me one-shotting everything with Fire Tempest wouldn't provide much content for the video. I could go down to Ash Lake and farm Twinklies to make my sword the most cartoonishly OP thing ever imagined, but I don't want to climb back out. Or I could finish off Darkroot, which would give me access to a soul farm good enough to fund my Pyromania, but I want the extended Sif scene, so I'm leaving him alive. I could go to the Catacombs for a chance to Giant Dad and get 20 Estus charges, but I also don't want to climb back out. I could go to New Londo and get myself into the plus 15 game, but I'm using a Twinkly sword most of the time anyway, and I can't finish it off without killing Sif. And finally, I could go back to the Asylum and get my max upgrade rock off the Stray Demon, but that's pointless if I'm not going to go to New Londo. So thanks to the process of elimination, we are going to Sens. I just wanted to acknowledge how damn good this game is with its world design and options. It doesn't fit with my rules, and there's no points for it, but I love that the game gives this many options to proceed, even this far in. Sense Fortress does a lot right, really. Lots of loops and secrets, a whole level spanning shortcut, unique traps and ideas, but it's also insufferably annoying. What sort of madman puts 4 Titanite demons in a tar pit that you need to fall into, which has you getting pelted with so many mages that it's genuinely hard to beat them even if you jump to where they are? I lost so many souls here and had a very bad time. There's just so many cheap gotcha moments and it's exhausting. I mean, it starts with you getting pelted with lightning bolts as you cross narrow bridges with deathfall causing swinging blades on them, and it only gets worse. The boss of the joint goes the other way and is instead a complete joke. I did the ceremonial let Tarkus solo him run, and you can see why it doesn't matter if I actually fought him or not. Tarkus was one whiff away from a clean no-hit. The Iron Golem spends the whole fight fallen over and waiting to die. There's a shortcut and a secret bonfire nearby. From didn't need to softball this one. Anor Londo is the follow-up, and it's grown on me apparently. I'd always been one of the Anor Londo's not really that great guys. Certainly not bad, but I never liked it as much as the levels before it. But I really enjoyed my trip through it this time. Obviously it looks great from the outside, even if the inside is a little bland. I'm not fond of the initial buttress crossing because it's too obscure, but otherwise it's fairly intuitive to explore and it's full of shortcuts and secrets. The enemies are fantastic, the loot is amazing, there's the whole dark Anor Londo thing you can do. I even nailed my parries on the archer's second try. It's really not that bad. The Titanite demon in the tiny room is way more annoying. The place is phenomenal. You know, I don't know if I've ever actually done Ornstein in Snow properly until now. First time I used Solaire, and I one-shot Fire Tempest them in all my other runs, so actually just knuckling down and winning the fight is new to me. And I get both takes on the boss. This took me 6 tries, and I would say it worked really well in 2 of them and was randomly a giant pain in the ass on the other 4. I know it's not true RNG, better players than me can no-hit this in their sleep, but for somewhat of my casual skill level, I found that sometimes they just sync rhythms and attack through one another or overlap their timings to perfectly catch dodges of the first one. When it works, it's a wonderful dance, but it's annoying getting shovel and slide tackled around the arena. Super runs are still cool though. Legendary for a reason, but I do see how people would have a few bad runs and write them off as cheap sadism. With the Lord Vessel in hand, I had a lot of options in where to go. I decided to head down to the catacombs and see if I could get myself a dad mask. I usually do this place earlier, and I think I'll continue doing that in future because at this stage I was too strong and just steamrolled the area. Even with the actual gameplay being basically removed from the area, I still really like this place. The serene gorge with dank caves winding through it is a nice varied aesthetic. There's the spiked bridges to unlock. The use of drop paths to get around quickly is extremely well considered. I like the summoner charge down gimmick. Patches is a goofy goober, and the Gravelord Covenant is cool as. Honestly, one of the best stages. Pinwheel is famously a joke. As I said, I usually go here pretty early, so this is my first time getting the true Pinwheel experience. Like, it's usually normally easy, but not this easy. The main appeal here is comedy and rolling giant dad dice, but I failed. After this, I went down to the Tomb of the Giants, only to discover to my dismay that I hadn't spoken to Framp and couldn't finish the area, so since I'm out already, I figured I'd go do the Painted World before heading back down. This is of course first hitting up the Stray Demon, who I forgot to record, but at least he's quick to get back to in New Game Plus. The Stray Demon is pretty bad. He looks exactly the same as the Asylum Demon who we've already seen, and is the same mechanically except now he's an AoE slam, which actually makes him easier for in and out smacks. He gets an annoyance point for the fall putting you into half health, and him having the RNG possibility to attack you while you're getting up. Otherwise, big ol' lame-o. Honestly pretty easy to kill with anything as lowly as the Uchigatana you get from the merchant at the start of the game. There's a tilt point for giving you the Titanite slab though. After this, I could go straight to the Painted World, but because the Black Knight Sword is kind of boring to use because it's only R1s, I wanted to get a fire weapon to mess up the toxic mobs in here for some variety. And since I can do that, why not make it a really, really good fire weapon? So I went to the Demon Ruins to get me the large fire ember. It's time to start running the crappy areas, I guess. The Demon Ruins are only moderately crap. It looks fairly decent. The lava is blinding, which brings it down, and there isn't really a lot here to do, so the interesting architecture doesn't really have enough time to shine. The enemy use here is horrible. I really like them bringing back the Taurus and Capra demons as regular enemies, but the way they just spammed everywhere is ridiculous. The worms are absolutely awful, and basically demand to be knocked out with arrows. The pots are there, I suppose. There's basically no mechanical level design to speak of. Along with the enemy spam, we also have boss spam here. I'm not sure why this little craphole has 3 bosses while Upper Blighttown couldn't get 1, but it's what it is. The first of which is Ceaseless Discharge, which I have an embarrassing confession to make on. I've forgotten how to cheese him. This guy killed me more than almost every other boss in the game as I wandered about trying to find the kill spot. In the end, I just beat him in a regular fight. Honestly, I'm glad it's an option, since if you had to do the set piece, it's really badly signposted and would be way more annoying than the Dragon God from Demon Souls. Fighting him fair is messy. He only has 4 moves, 2 of which I could not figure out how to dodge. The fireball at least only happens at range, but that side sweep hit me literally every time I tried anything, so if he'd used that more I would have been stuck. Thankfully he goes down in 3 combos and behaved for me. The Asylum Demon is back, and now he's red. The AoE being applied to regular swings and kind of moving around based on what attack he's doing gives a little more mechanical depth than the Stray, so it's probably the best fight of the 3. Your mileage may be worn out by now though. The final entrant in this batch of bosses is the Centipede Demon, who's an interesting case of actually having some strong elements but ruining them pointlessly. I'm not crazy about the look. I usually like messy creatures, but having like dragon legs and the centipede just kind of bolted on top is weird. And even if I did enjoy the ugly mess more, it'd be pushed down by the arena being full of Dark Souls' eye-bleeding lava. This boss fight is like staring at a light bulb. Mechanically, it's the same thing. He's not really a bad encounter. The Mega Punch is too severe given it could two-shot me through a shield and he does it back-to-back, so it took me a couple of deaths to learn which way to dodge. But otherwise, there's some jumps which break lock-on, some slaps, and a fireball thing, which honestly is not a bad little roster. But he's so big that you can't see or make anything out when you're in melee range. And more importantly, the area is lava, meaning you need to fight it on a tiny platform and it sucks. So here's one of my more unpopular opinions. Lost Izalith isn't bad. I know, there's the eye-bleeding lava field of dragon asses, but it's like 2 minutes long and basically the asses don't even aggro. Don't get me wrong, it's lazy and unfinished, but it's not that bad. The worst thing about it is you need to switch your rings every time you go into the level. The main portion of the level though, it's fine. I think the textures look a bit cruddy, but it's a new type of ruins and the trees running over everything looks kinda cool. The enemies are interesting and pretty unobtrusive. It's a little annoying dealing with the sticks on the ground which can get you stuck, but it's a solid enough little set of loops and an admittedly not even a faster shortcut. I genuinely don't hate it here. I am, however, getting Quelana's quest finished, so I can't kill off the Bed of Chaos just yet, so I'm off to the Painted World. The Painted World is possibly the best level From has ever made. The enemies exploding and toxic if you don't have a fire weapon is obnoxious, but otherwise I think this place is flawless. It looks amazing, it's so dense with treasure, it's got loops and shortcuts everywhere, there's optional methods to skip half the level, the birds have incredible asses, the level is perfection. It's absolutely wild that this is a hidden level, hidden behind an item found within another hidden level. Miyazaki is a mad genius. The boss doesn't quite live up to the level, but Priscilla is alright. There's a couple of gimmicks to her, she talks to you and asks you to leave, allowing you to skip the battle or get a super easy tail cut, and then she turns invisible. It's actually really hard to gauge what she does because she's invisible, so you can't really see it. But the footprint thing is kinda neat other than they feel a bit deceptive as to their location. I swear I'm not going to Chaos Storm and Tempest everything. It's just the best way to make her come back visible and I accidentally cast a second time instead of pulling up my shield. With that, it's now time to get back to the Bed of Chaos. I used my fancy new Soul Farm to buy out Quelana and Eggbro, and began what I assumed would be many trips into the game's stinky butthole of chaos. And I regret to inform you that it went really well. I one-ran this. First try. No loading, no falling over, no getting swept around. The gimmick is still a bad idea and it's no fun, but this was an absolute breeze and it went fine. So now I've got a dilemma. I know this thing can be an obnoxious mess. I already knew the general places to step, and unlike the Dragon God and Ceaseless, I didn't forget them over the last 10 years since they are fairly clearly marked out. So, my experience is completely fine. In fact, I was excited as I have been all game when I realized I'd randomly gotten through it first go. But I know what it can be, so I don't know how to rate it. After that assumed mess went shockingly well, I went and got my Fire Tempest without needing to kill Quelana for once, and decided to clear up a quick little side job with Gwendolyn, an optional boss which is pretty lucky to be optional. He looks somewhat fancy, and that's really all there is to say. There's 3 completely ineffectual attacks and running away. Again, my luck held up, and I was able to kill him in 2 cycles and avoided a lot of annoyance when he warps too often. With a few low points in a row turning out to be something resembling tolerable, I was starting to gain hope for the Duke's Archives, which has historically been my least favourite area in the game. But nope, I still hate it here. It's not a terrible looking place in screenshots. There's books, there's stairs, they look good enough, but the whole level is just 3 floors and 2 mirrored rooms with the same thing, and it all just looks identical. The prison section has an annoying sound, and the grass texture at the back looks worse than the Izalith lava too. Mechanically, it's too small to be a huge pain, but it's still annoying crossing back and forth and spinning stairs and looking at places that all look the same, trying to figure out which specific segment has progress in it. Most importantly, the enemies are horrible. The whole place is full of archers and mages and ambushes from guys who do twice the damage you'd expect. It's annoying to navigate, and it pesters you with rage spam the whole time. Bad combo. On top of that, we have the only forced deaths in the game that you need to progress, which is always lame. It's one of these places that isn't that bad on paper, but I just despise being here. The boss of the area is actually hidden behind a second sub-area, which, it might actually be worse. The cave looks okay, I like the butterflies hanging out, and that's it for positives. The gimmicks here are invisible paths and slippery slopes. That's all it has. This is my first time playing this offline, and God, it's a mess without messages everywhere. Why is there a developer message you telling there's a fall imminent on the actual path to the end? There's basically no enemies to complicate things, and it's just a straight run once you know it. But God, this place is awful. The boss to cap off this nightmare is not as bad, but still bad. He's effectively non-existent if you don't want the tail, and is tedious when you do. Basically, he's too slow to do anything, and only has a fence in his front and back, so fighting him is just walking around hitting him on the sides while he does nothing to defend himself. Getting the tail on the hand is a 5-minute long slog where you have to deal with getting all the way around only for him to turn around or do tail slams. With the DLC waiting, I decided to clean up our last couple of meaningless areas. Generally I consider these two sections as one zone, but my rules do say that anything with a name that is somewhat substantial counts, so it's 2 crappy areas instead of just one to help us tank the overall score a bit after that beastly first half. From were bad at nature visual back in the PS3 days, so this giant tree is just bad root textures all the way down. It's a horrible nightmare of bad geometry crossing from thing to thing. You couldn't pay me to get all the treasure. Ash Lake doesn't really feel like a zone, but it has a Covenant, mini-boss, and quite a bit of loot, and even some enemies, so sadly it is big enough to count. The vibes are obviously lovely, but the sandbar itself looks bad, and the geometry on it is terrible. Honestly, there's too little here to really score in any department, which is probably okay because the look is solid. The Tomb of Giants is the last place we have to hit up before the DLC. Since I ended up doing Izalith first, I did waste 4 levels getting my intelligence up enough to use Cast Light the first time, but that's the list of this place's problems. I like that you can see Ash Lake from here, but overall this place is just black and scattered bones. The enemies aren't overly fun, with the Bone Dogs being capable of absolutely wrecking you. That does make them a big adrenaline rush when they show up, and I do find the skeleton babies to be hilarious. The boss here is easily my favourite of the Lord Soul bosses. He looks incredibly badass, his moveset, while extremely non-threatening if you've got more than 5 Estus flasks, is interesting with that scream, tell, floor spike, noxious AoE that goes further than expected, a grab that doesn't feel unfair and doesn't do like 1200 damage, and his cool evil sword looks slick swinging around. He does tend to just miss, and the respawning skeleton adds don't add anything to the experience, but overall, he's an enjoyable bag of bones to wail on. And now it's DLC time. The DLC kicks into gear with a boss which is fairly advanced mechanically, but also very squishy and doesn't pack much punch. A pretty excellent introduction to the increased demands of Ulasil. I really like this guy. He can spend too much time flying around and running away, but it's not too bad. I'm very glad the double version doesn't have a health bar though. Killing it opens up the first actual area, and it's one which grows on you. At first it just seems like a big empty field with a billion enemies in it, which it is, but as you explore there's actually quite a bit of level design in it with all the little side sections and ways to get across the chasm. It becomes quite a shortcut hub for the rest of the DLC also. The boss here is my favourite boss in the whole game, and it's up there for the whole series. I'm disappointed in myself for switching back to my Havel Black Knight build after getting extremely annoyed by losing like 48,000 souls sliding off a dodgy bit of cliff geometry on my run back. My attempts to the Life Hunt Scythe were a lot cooler and well played than the absolutely gutter performance I have here in this win. Still, I love this guy. The look is phenomenal, the lore is immense, the intro is badass, his moveset is complex, stunningly theatrical and flashy, yet incredibly readable. It's still somewhat difficult without ever really being a chance to one combo or one-shot you. He's got enough health that you'll see his full range of moves in a single bout. He's not so intense that you'll feel overwhelmed, but you do need to make dodge windows to heal. Unless you have Havels, in which case you'll just out-heal your punishment hits. I love him with all my heart, and is the absolute ideal of what I want a From boss to be. After that highlight is the township of Ulasil, which I don't like as much as I feel I should. The layout is pretty outstanding with all the loops and shortcuts, and the enemies are fun, but I don't know, I don't feel anything here. Maybe it's the aesthetics are just kind of bland. It's a castle-y type structure with some overgrowth and the encroaching abyss leaking in. But yeah, I find the architecture really bland, and the abyss just being some blue spray paint on the walls feels not enough. I do like how parts of it are sinking and put you on a weird angle though. I also find that it's lacking an enemy type to actually fight. There's trash mob ganks and supporting mages, and that's it. It's lacking corrupted soldiers or something to actually throw down with. At the entrance to the abyss itself, I duck back out to go harass Calamite. I really enjoy the fight aside from one thing. There's a very methodical pace to the encounter, to the point that I can actually do with a little more heal pressure in there, but I enjoy understanding all the things I can do and just working through them for a few minutes. The one downside is the tail cut. Between the two tails in the DLC and Seath, I'm honestly super pleased they dropped the mechanic going forward because this type of thing is obnoxious. My first attempt here, I just focused on getting behind him, and after like 4 minutes I hadn't taken a single swing. In the actual kill here, where I just stopped caring, I got one opening on the tail in the entire 5-minute battle. It's a bad mechanic when the enemies directly avoid having their tails exposed outside of them doing one of their 13 other attacks. After this, I spent a morning farming souls in Demon Titanite to give Artorias the proper revenge he deserves, before heading down to the Chasm of the Abyss. This place is kinda cruddy. It's a dinky little cave with bad visibility. It's a better looking cave texture than we've seen, but it is still just cave. Despite the size, there's enough here, with Baby Sif's trail the main highlight, but there's also a handy shortcut which basically lets you skip all the combat before the very challenging boss. Manus was always my pick for the hardest boss in the PS3 era, to the point that on my first playthrough I gave up and did the arrow cheese, and while I can still kinda see why I had that opinion, it's lessened. If I brought back my Havel Black Knight in here, it probably would have been a first tryer. I brought along Sif for the aura, but given he doesn't really do anything, I don't think he impacted the difficulty too much. Manus is by far the most aggressive thing in Dark Souls 1, and he does leave windows to heal if you dodge behind him though. My main issue is that massive combo where I literally can't see my guy and I have no idea what's happening until it's over. I don't think I've ever dodged it, and in the dark room the visibility just falls apart there. I also don't like messing with my hotbar in combat, so the magic stuff tends to go very poorly for me. With the DLC down, I could finally go and do what I'd put off all this time, and go visit grown-up Sif with his fancy new intro and... why do I do this to myself? He tries to pat the puppy and it's even sadder than usual. Anyway, Sif is a fun boss. Really cool design, lots of spinny moves that look cool, he's kinda harmless overall, but he rules, and that last few health is devastating. Another little farm for a new Artorias sword for ghost hunting later, and we're off to New Londo, a place that's nearly peak except for a couple of shortcomings. The place looks cool, the enemies are excellent, the ghost gimmick and option to kill the gatekeeper early to skip into the area is wonderful. There's insane loot here, and overall the layout is complex and rewarding. There's shortcuts and even a really big skip that I stumbled into just because I missed a jump. It's just too big to not have a bonfire here. The elevator down from either Dark Route or Firelink are lengthy, boring repetitions and they need to be removed. Lastly, the final segment before the boss is way too samey looking and it's easy to get lost looking for the right exit. Somewhere along the way I fell into a hole thinking it was stairs in the dark, so I came back in through the Valley of the Drakes, a place that barely counts as an area really. It's a connecting area between two areas that no one ever needs to move between, with a bunch of mini dragons spanned around and a big zombie one which sucks. After going through there, I made it down to the Four Kings, which are usually just face tank with Havels, which didn't work as well with the Artorias gear to the point that I only just snuck through with the win. These dudes are pretty whatever. The Black Void Arena is disorienting, which is kinda cool but largely just off-putting for depth perception. Due to them all having damaging ranged attacks, you just kinda need to rush everything down instead of considering their apparently pretty robust movesets. Could be worse, could be better. With our last Lord Soul finished up, we're now pretty much done. I did one last Murder Hobo tour of Lordran, look away kids, upgraded everything I could get a trophy for, and then finally headed down to the kiln of the First Flame. My feelings on this area are definitely tainted by how I decided to fight the boss, since I spent a lot of time here. It's a cool looking place, very eerie, but it's just a long straight line to the boss with 5 Black Knights on it. It'd be fine as a little gauntlet, but it takes like 2 minutes to get down there with there being about 20 seconds of running between some of the knights, some of which are in very annoying locations. I died to Gwyn a lot, so I ended up taking this one many times. Usually I fight this guy like a real fight, because I'm bad at parrying, but given I'm putting this on YouTube, I was determined to do the YouTube kill and, man, am I bad at parrying. There's a lot of rhetoric about how they ruin the boss by making him parryable, because it makes him so easy, but let's just say that I had 24 Titanite chunks going into New Game Plus. But I do get it. When it works, it really does remove the fight. You land 4 parries before you miss 2 in a row. That's the whole experience. I don't think it's easier than just beating him, but it does take out most of his moveset and lessens the encounter. And that's the whole game done. I really love coming back through this. If anything, I liked it even more than I used to. So many Souls-likes since the mid-2010s are these extra flashy, super challenging, technically demanding games. But this is a reminder of why I connected so strongly to that simple mechanical taking turns and learning process in the first place. The world design still holds up better than anything else I've ever played. It's probably why the levels are so small, and it is a very limiting approach, so I understand why they've never done it since, but how you're never really more than like 5 minutes away from everywhere else completely on foot is absolutely mind-blowing. The freedom it allows in putting together builds is really only matched by Elden Ring, and that does it through sheer scale rather than cleverness. I have issues with the weapon balancing. That Black Knight sword drop at the start kind of ruined a lot of the growth and experimentation for me, and that's ignoring the fact I could have maxed it out before even fighting the Taurus demon if I wanted to. It's mostly stood out because it's a kind of boring weapon since its R2s are too slow to really be viable for anything, and it was still my strongest weapon come the end of the game, even with late game stats, topped only by other Black Knight weapons, and only by a couple of points. There's no reason the Abyss Greatsword should be like 60 AR behind it, given it weighs almost the same, requires more stats, and requires beating Artorias to unlock. That sort of thing is all over the place, with basically all my infusions ending up like 2/3 as damaging at best. Most boss weapons in particular really didn't stack up to much more easily utilized alternatives. But enough on the overall game. Let's get into the actual fallout of this rating process. Unlike Demon's Souls, where the levels carried an underwhelming boss roster, this one had the bosses outperforming the levels quite handily. Obviously the late game drop-off is a big factor there. The areas completable before the Lord Vessel are worth a total of 106 points, while the post-Lord Vessel regions can beat a -3, with the DLC areas adding 18 to that total, so it's a raw 21 point loss for everywhere locked beyond that point. The other factor in this drop-off is that Dark Souls levels are surprisingly small. In Demon's Souls, I had a few stages like Boletaria 4 that I docked for being little more than a couple of main structures and a connecting tunnel, but that's honestly the scale that a lot of this operates in. Even levels I really liked, such as the Undead Parish, really is only a couple of paths bolted onto 2 main encampments. They're also nowhere near as consistently outstanding in terms of visuals, putting in an average half the points that Demon's Souls levels did in that metric. On the boss front, I was surprised by the general standard being so high, with the stuff that doesn't come up when we're talking about the big highlight encounters still meeting some minimum standards reliably. They mostly look cool, they mostly have enough moves to entertain a little, and they move around enough to keep the excitement up without too many obtrusive gimmicks. There's nothing fails on every metric like a Leechmonger here. The DLC in general is a big boost for the overall score, with its small amount of content giving us our highest average numbers in both scoring topics, particularly bosses which are all top-end entrants. I guess it makes sense since they're smaller, so there's more time for them to polish things up, but still, that's a big gap. The 4 bosses alone outscore the entirety of the Demon's Souls ones. Without the DLC, the post-Lord Vessel boss roster contributes a mere 7 points, and that's with me being the most okay with the Bed of Chaos of any person in the entire world. Since we now have 2 games completed, we can finally start doing some ranking. As an entire product, Dark Souls takes the prize, through a mix of sheer volume and boss quality, and the strength of its DLC. Without the DLC, it still would have beaten Demon's Souls, but it would lose the head-to-head level matchup despite having 8 more of them. Demons really did excel consistently in that department. The DLC on its own put up a pretty respectable 71 given it's only 2 hours long if you get everything. I'm curious to see whether it can beat Dark Souls 2 on its own. And on that note, that's what's on next. I'm actually super excited to revisit Drangleic again, given I only played it once over a decade ago and never touched the DLCs, so I'm keen to see how that turns out. I'll see you then.